Hey, what is up? Unrested back with another Osoroshii Saturday. This one's coming out a little bit late, but hey, I'm keeping to the schedule. Every Saturday, each and every time, scary stories. Let's start with our first one. Today, as I've been doing recently, is starting with a scary place. Almost every place that I've covered, there is a website and a lot of wikis that you can look up to cover them, and that's the same for the one we're about to cover today, Jomon Tunnel. Jomon Tunnel is all the way up in Hokkaido, which is, if you don't already know, the farthest north you can go in Japan. Very cold, bitter winters. And when winter starts there, it gets really rough really fast. Now, when Japan was first settling this land, they used to take prisoners up there, and they would use them to kind of civil engineer the entire area. Now, of course, they would have architects draw up the plans as far as roads, pathways, temples, shrines, and tunnels. This tunnel, though, was notorious for being one of the most brutally built tunnels ever. It is claimed that the jail prisoners that came there were beaten severely, starved severely, and treated the worst of all in Hokkaido that came there. Now, we're talking a very long time ago. This is even before World War II. This is before Japan became a first world country. We're talking, before human rights. So there wasn't a lot of policing of how prisoners were handled when they were in a chain gang. So that's what's going on here. And these guys are put into this tunnel where each day they are given only one bowl of rice and one bowl of miso soup to eat for the entire day. Now, if any of you have ever eaten one little tiny bowl of the rice that usually comes as a side dish a la carte in Japan, you know that just eating that would not be enough for even a very slight person. For example, my kids could eat one of those and still be very hungry. Miso soup, it tastes great, I love it, but it's not gonna fill you up. So these guys are starving every day of their existence. It is brutal, they're getting beaten. They would be worked until they were sick, and when they got sick, if they fell over, if they collapsed from exhaustion, they were just left to die. And it was known that during this time, one of the rituals that was put into act to supposedly enchant or build strength upon a sort of almost talisman power of places built is they would do what's called hitobashira, okay? This means a human wall or a human pillar. You're gonna probably see both if you look this one up. And, the word hito obviously meaning person in the wall, okay? This would be taking a dead person or sometimes even a live person, especially very horrible criminals. Not saying all these criminals that were out there building these tunnels were the worst of the worst. They were just probably the most unlucky. They would be worked to death, and oftentimes when they did finally collapse, their bodies would be put into the walls of the Jomon Tunnel. Now, the Jomon Tunnel was around for years and years, and even eventually when Japan's entire train system came around, it was used for that as well, not just for agriculture and transfer of products and distribution of goods. There were train lines put through these tunnels, and there were always stories coming back about these tunnels being haunted. Now, at this time, Japan hadn't had archaeology and paleontology done on this area to find out the entire history. They hadn't gone into the carbon, dated things, and really explored every aspect. We're talking still very early Japan, when technology is just sort of starting to arrive, right after World War I more so. And the train conductors who would go through this tunnel would constantly report back to station managers that they were seeing ghosts. One of the most famous stories that was reported, written down, and logged into history was a train conductor running his, steam engine at that point through the tunnel. During this time, he saw somebody on the tracks and was able to quickly stop and not hit the person. But the creepiest thing about it was, even though they were yelling at them to move, they could see there was like a bleeding wound coming down the man's head who was wandering on the tracks. And he thought, perhaps this is why this man is wandering here. He's been injured in some way, he's confused, and he's wandering down the tracks in a daze. So this train conductor stops his train. He has time to do it, seeing as steam locomotions weren't quite as quick as today's modern rails. And he got out. When he did, he attempted to approach the man, but realized from the moment he had left the door of the train and started onto the track, somehow the man had disappeared during that time. He got back into his train again, and once again, he starts his train up and sees the man slowly ambling toward him, blood pouring down his head, to the point that he thought, this man should have been passed out by now. I mean, this is so much blood running down this guy's face. What is going on? He stops his train again, he gets out, and again, the man is gone. But behind him this time, he sees a light from an oncoming train, and that train quickly notices him and sees that he's stopped in the middle of Jomon Tunnel, stops their train as well. And I'm talking about just the main engines are going through this tunnel to transfer to another station. So that conductor there stops, gets out and says, man, what's going on? Like, why are you stopped here in the middle of the tunnel? Do you need some sort of assistance? Did you run out of coal? What's going on? And he tells him the story. He says, I don't know what is going on. I'm seeing a ghost in here, which there's blood rising from his head. It's smeared all over his face, and the man looks like he's going to pass out, except every time I get out of my train and go to look for him, he's not there. The other guy says, look, you've been working all day. It's dark in this tunnel. Sometimes our brains just make up goofy stuff that they see in the dark. Let's switch. I'll ride your train in the front. My train in the back can be ridden by you. We both know how to ride both of these trains. I'll go ahead and do the front part so that if anything shows up, I can see it, and I'll navigate around it, or, let you know to stop your train behind me. That guy starts up, and apparently just as he does and gets the train to full speed, he thinks, oh brother, what's going on with this guy behind me saying he's seeing a ghost? Apparently at that point, a ghost showed up and scared him so badly that the man shoveling the coal into the back heard a scream from the conductor. And as the man was shaking there on the floor and pale in the face from seeing some sort of entity or ghost, he muttered that he had seen the same bloody man that the other conductor had seen, and that it had scared him so bad that he was in shock now. By the time they got him back to the station and they slowed the trains down and kept everything safe, the man had died from cardiac arrest. And apparently the man behind him and the man who had died both had almost the exact same description of the bloody ghost that they saw. Now, where does this come from? Well, it's believed that this is a ghost or an entity from the abused that were used to make these tunnels and their bodies placed within. First, people thought, maybe here and there might be a couple places throughout Japan. Once in a while they would dissect a place, or do one of those spectrograms, I guess you'd call it, where you look through the wall and see what's in the walls. They'd actually look for this because, if you didn't already guess, actually burying a body into a wall is structurally unsound. It's not good for the integrity of the building. Bodies rot. Concrete does not rot, at least not as quick as a body. So they would try to find these because usually there'd just be like a bubble in the shape of a body. Well, they decided, let's go ahead and start doing this with Jomon Tunnel. After we had heard these reports through history and seen these logged in these old train books, they do it, and guess what they find? Not one body, not two bodies, just hundreds of bodies buried in these walls of the cave. Apparently, it had been smoothed out so it was easy to get through the cave, but within this smoothed out concrete mixture and mortar of the tunnel were just hundreds of skulls, bones, bodies. Now, if you want to believe that ghosts would come from these, they would be some sort of residual haunting. That means a haunting that happens over and over again. Whatever pain that person suffered during death is seen again and again. I would say that this would have to be the people who received severe beatings from whoever the guards were for these prisons. Now, is it still haunted today? Well, the good thing to know now with Jomon Tunnel is that there was actually a benefactor who paid for all the bones to be moved, blessed, and reburied. And as of modern times, there haven't been any reports of any sightings. So hopefully now those souls rest in peace. All right, I'm gonna end this part of today's Osoroshii Saturday with a very long ending, okay? So don't worry, we're not just suddenly cutting to the end at the last story here. I'm gonna kind of combine three little descriptions in here because one thing people have been complaining about is they said, Scott, before, you had these ghosts on film, you had these scary stories about haunted places, But where's our Leukemia Bites? If you don't know, in the past, we used to have an end of the show segment called Leukemia Bites. Leukemia meaning creepy, bites as in B-Y-T-E-S, such as digital, media, video games, pixelated horrors, visual novels. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is 3 very creepy visual novels that you may not have heard of. And if you're looking to extend your Osoroshii experience, I would highly suggest purchasing these. I think you can find almost all of them on Steam. All right. Some of them, I think you're going to have to go to more remote surfaces, or they're going to either be completely free on the internet and you're going to just have to download it there and use Tyran build or something to run them in. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to go through the 3 top that I think are the most creepy. Now, I've played a few. I've played, your Doki Doki Literature Club. I've played your Higurashi When They Cry, Cry of the Cicadas. Those are creepy. They're okay. But I want to go darker and deeper than that. I want to get into the morbid stuff. So I'm going to kind of gradually ratchet up. If you play the first one I mentioned and you think it's too much, don't play the next 2. They're going to be worse. So let's start first with SIA No Uta, or the Song of Saya. Now, this story blew my mind. It is about a man who is a doctor, but he gets into a horrible car wreck. After this car wreck, he has severe damage to his brain, but not in a way that debilitates him learning or remembering or speaking, but his senses. Now, this is an actual prognosis that people can have that will actually stimulate their senses in a weird way. You may have heard in the past that some people can see colors through music. Well, imagine like that, but in a bad way. In this bad way, it means that things that he smells, things that he sees, and things that he hears have all been totally grotesque and absolutely putrefied. So, for example, when he looks at his friends who are just normal humans who are inviting him to come hang out at a party to welcome him back after he just got out of the hospital, they no longer look like humans to him. Now, he's a doctor and he's of sound mind still, so he knows there's no change to their actual physical being, but when he looks at them, they look like chunks of rotting meat, and they're disgusting, they smell horrible, they smell like rotting flesh. When they speak, he can understand what they're saying, but he says it sounds like vomiting and burps and explosions of like just liquefied talking, which is, it just sounds horrible. You would not want to have whatever this man has in his brain after this injury. So he's going through life absolutely depressed. He is about to commit suicide because he is so depressed at how horrible living is now for him. Everywhere he looks like it's covered with rotted meat. Everyone he talks to sounds like a living corpse, blurbing out horrible guttural sounds. Okay, he's 24/7 in a constant death metal video, if you know what I mean. Then, one day, a beautiful girl appears in his life, and this is Saya. All right, Saya shows up, and she says, wait, don't kill yourself. And he said, oh my God, this girl is so beautiful. This is the first girl I've seen since I've gotten out of the hospital that is so beautiful. And even when you see her in the visual novel, she's kind of like this sort of fae creature, this pixie-esque Japanese girl. And she has like little wings, but they're very, very pixie, like I said. And she's almost like a floating fairy, but like of normal human size. And he falls in love. He is absolutely in love with this girl. But he finds out she is an alien, okay? Of course, because Japan, that's why. And she is an alien. But I mean, she looks totally human, beautiful, aside from fairy wings. And she needs to eat human flesh to survive. He begins a long road with her of murder, chaos, killing, slaughtering, murdering his friends to keep her alive. He realizes if he doesn't do this, she starts to die, and she's the only beautiful thing in his life. Now, I'm not going to totally spoil the endings of any of these visual novels, because if you get into them yourself, you're going to find they have multiple endings. So I'm going to at least tell you the ending I got. From what I've heard, some of these that I'm going to tell you about today have up to 25 endings. So am I spoiling it? It's up to you. If you really think I am, stop the video now and I'll see you later. But this video is going to cover what happens in the rest of SIA No Uta, the Song of Saya. And after their murder spree of this doctor who now sees everything as grotesque and this girl who is the most beautiful thing in his life, he does horrible things. He eventually gets more and more seduced into keeping her alive by both feeding off of his friends, killing them, chopping up their bodies, feeding it to his girlfriend. And you're playing as this character as you go through the game, which is insanely morbid. And by the end of it, his alien-esque girlfriend, you find out, is not this beautiful, majestic being, but actually everything is the opposite, because he sees in opposites. Everything around him is still totally normal. He's been killing innocent people. She's actually a grotesque meat husk of slimy proportions who talks in a burbly, gurgly, guttural, oinky oinky toilet bowl voice, okay? And he's just murdered his innocent, normal-looking friends and fed it to her. And he's the murderer. You turn out to be the murderer at the end. But there are somewhat better endings. Actually, really, all the endings of that game are pretty damn dark. All right, now we're getting darker, okay? Like I said, if that one's too much for you, don't play these other two, okay? The next two are going to be by the same maker. They are called, number one, Euphoria, and the second one, Maggot Baits. Euphoria, man, I'm going to only have to give a very brief description of this one, or my video is just going to get censored. I can't show any screenshots from this one because it is just, I mean, it is next level. If you're not into any kind of torture or sadomasochism, which I'm not into that, but I like it as a horror element, then this game's not for you. It is very splatterpunk-esque in the sense that the things that happen to people are very, you know, bodily dismemberment, amputation. And it starts out very simply though, with a class of a teacher, 1 boy student and 7 girl students, suddenly transferred into an institute that they have no clue about. It seems to be a very Spartan area with little to nothing in the room other than a big white shiny room, and an AI is speaking to these characters as they enter. Now, what this AI is out to test is what is the limit of human sadomasochism. What can people dish out and what can people take? And you can pretty much think about where the game goes from there. You play the boy in the game and you go through mutilating the other characters and being forced to do stuff that you would never really want to do. And the character says that as well, that he's like, I can't believe I have to do this to this person to survive. The person will tell you, no, it's okay, I get it. Like, if we don't do this, we have collars on that will explode, like we're in Suicide Club, except it's better written. And it just keeps pushing the limits more and more to the things you're doing, stuff like cutting off people's tongues, injecting them with all sorts of serums that warp their mind and body. And like I said, that's probably all I can do with the description. If I get any farther into it, I mean, I might as well just make this whole video a black screen. Next up is the last on the list, and that is Maggot Baits. And this is by the same maker and somewhat in the same vein of, I guess what you would call torture porn. It's pretty brutal. I didn't actually get all the way through this one because it even reached limits where I was just like, oh man, what is going on? Like, my mind is kind of blown. Not that I'm too grossed out, but there's points where I'm just like, what is the point? It's written really well, okay? And it is about these girls who are being tortured by these tentacle / maggot creatures. Why tentacles? Because Japan, of course. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty standard answer, I think, when it comes to girls and tentacles. And these creatures, which are like, I don't know, serpentine, maggot-esque, like giant maggots, are using these girls to test as carriers for their spawn. And the ways in which they implant these spawn into them just continues to get more and more gruesome as it goes on. Now, I only briefly played the beginning of this game, and already I was like, oh my god, what am I getting into? You know, I would need, first of all, a lot of time to be able to play this because I would need to be alone reading this different stuff. I can't be doing this out loud in a house of little kids who can look at the screen anytime, all right? So maybe if you have a family, this is a play alone sort of game, all right? I think all of these you can get on Steam, and if you can't get them there, I'm sure if you just Google any of these titles, you'll get into them. But if you want to push yourself to the limits of what is truly Osoroshii and Bukimi and Kimoi, then these are the games for you. You've been warned though. You have been warned. Alright guys, that should be it for today. I hope I gave you a lot to work with as far as time off that we still have in quarantine. I hope you all are staying safe and healthy. I hope to come back next week and very soon within to this summer coming up with a massive media drop. This is going to be movies, ghost videos, sightings, documentaries, all kinds of stuff you can just plunge your mind into and escape into the darkness, all right? You'll be swimming in liquid black for as long as you can take it with the amount I'm going to drop on you. So I may skip next week, and if I do skip next week for Osoroshii Saturday, it's only because I am putting together a massive reserve of media. Until next time, I am Unrested. This has been Osoroshii Saturday. Have a good one.